Hey guys, welcome back to art. Today I'm going to show you the project that we have been working on in class. I am going to be working on a small, just regular 9 by 12 inch sheet of construction paper today, or drawing paper. We are eventually going to move to a larger 18 by 24 inch sheet of paper, but whatever you have at home is perfect. I'm going to work on this smaller paper today so that you guys can see everything that I'm drawing. However, whatever size of paper or kind of paper that you have is also totally fine. So we're going to get started. You are going to need a piece of paper, lined or unlined preferably, but lined paper will also work. A ruler if you have one. If you don't have a ruler, something straight edged would be helpful to have. So a book or a notebook or another sheet of paper that you fold. I have a ruler, so I'm going to work with that, and a pencil. And that's all you need today. It may also be helpful to have access to the internet, which obviously you do. But it may be helpful because as you're working, you may want to pull up reference images, and that'll make more sense once we get into it. But what you're going to need to start are just these, and let's get going. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so today we're going to be creating something called a worm's eye view perspective drawing, which means it's the same thing as the perspective drawings we've done in the past. We're just going from a different angle. So whereas before we've drawn a 1-point perspective looking down a road, or a 2-point perspective seeing the corner of a street or a city block, today we're going to be working on something that the perspective is from a worm's eye view. So down really low on the ground looking up. So kind of the opposite of what you would think of a bird's eye view, which would be an aerial or above view of something. We're looking from underneath up at buildings. So as an example, this is sort of what we're going for, where we're going to be looking through this sort of looking glass or view hole or viewfinder, something along that line, up into a series of buildings. Now, what I'm going to be showing you is a couple of different styles of buildings. However, you get to decide what buildings you want to include. So the only requirement for your building choices is you have to have some sort of theme to your buildings. So it could be all buildings you would see in like New York City. They could be all famous buildings or all iconic buildings from around the globe. However you want to theme it is up to you. I am going to stick with buildings in cities that I've been to, right? Or buildings that maybe I have lived in my life. So as long as you have some sort of theme, it can be whatever you want. So if you notice though, just like with all of our other perspective drawings and lesson projects, and I'll show you, we'll look at two where we've got a different number of buildings in each. Obviously these are both still in progress examples, but we're looking at a vanishing point in both pieces. The vanishing point is this dot here in the center, and if you remember, with perspective, a vanishing point is the distance or the spot that everything sort of disappears to your eye, right? So everything at that point gets too far away for your eye to see it, and everything around it, right, goes into that point. So it sort of disappears into our vanishing point. So if you think about a building, which standard city, skyscraper buildings are rectangle shapes, right? But if you are standing underneath, towards the bottom of the building on the ground, looking up, what's going to happen is the top part of our building is going to look smaller and skinnier than the bottom part of our building. That's because it's getting further away from our eye. So to do that, we start with our circle shape, and we divide it up into pizza slices, and then we fill each of these pizza slices with a building design. And this is super helpful because now I know exactly how small my building is going to be at each height, right? So the only challenge that you may have with the angles and things receding, right, or getting smaller and further away, is you have to then keep everything else in that same angle, right? And the same trajectory or same line towards our vanishing point, just like we do in any other perspective drawing. So what I'm going to show you guys is how to draw a couple different kinds of buildings and talk about really briefly things that might be different in different styles of buildings or different buildings that have different functions or purposes, like churches versus apartment buildings versus pizza restaurants. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the details in each of those. So to start, I'm going to draw a circle in the center of my paper. Now, obviously this is not going to be perfect. That is fine. This is sort of my sketch drawing. For your final drawing, if you find something to trace or if you have a protractor, that would be helpful. If you need a simple way to draw a large circle on your sheet of paper, you can always find tips online, or I can include a video that shows you how to do that with a piece of string. But for now, what I'm going to do is, to get the nicest circle I can without tracing something, I'm going to find around where the center of my paper is. Roll off to the side. There we go. Around where the center is, I'm going to put the bottom part of my hand right on that spot, so that I'm able to turn the paper or to spin the paper with relative ease without it sliding up and down and around. So I don't want to press too hard because then I can't move my paper, but you don't want to press too lightly because then it'll slide. So I'm going to find the spot, I'm going to rest my hand there, I'm going to put my pencil down, and all I'm going to do is spin my paper. Definitely not completely perfect, but a lot closer than if I were to try to just freehand it, and this will be great just to start us out with our sketch. So obviously my two little dots here are not really in the center of my circle. I'm going to go ahead and erase those, and I'm going to find a vanishing point. Your vanishing point does not have to be right in the center. I think it's easier to draw when you do put it right in the center. However, it can be off to one side if that's more interesting to you, or you think it would be better for the type of buildings that you want to include. But I'm going to start with mine as close to the center as I can. Again, I'm not trying to make it perfect. We'll start there. And then all I'm going to do is divide my circle into a few different sections. I'm going to do 8 or 9 different buildings, because if I keep it at 4 or less than that, I'm going to end up with really large bases for my buildings, and it's going to look a little bit more awkward. It's going to look a lot more strange that they go to such a small point. So I'm going to divide it into smaller sections, and I'm going to make them all different sizes. Okay, so now that I've divided it up into all my different sections, I can start adding all my buildings. Notice that, again, they are not all the same size. You can make them even if you would like to. I like to make sure that there are a few that are a little bit smaller or a little bit larger, because that gives variety to our drawing, which makes it more interesting to look at, and it'll also help distinguish between the buildings, because they will all be different sizes and different heights. So pick anywhere to start. I'm going to start with a larger piece so that we can see a little bit better, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. Alright, so I'm going to start in this piece here, and I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to make this an office building. Right, so if you think about an office building, a lot of times they have a flat roof. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a regular flat parallel line. Like that. And that's going to be the top of my building. Now, these are the left and right wall of my building. So I'm going to have a door here at the bottom, and then I'll have windows going up. Now, all of our horizontal lines, right, so the straight across, are going to match with this line at the top. And all of our vertical lines, so the lines going up and down, are going to match up to our vanishing point. So that's where we're going to be pulling all of our line direction from. The easiest way to do that is with a ruler or something with the flat edge. So I know that I want to do a door here at the bottom, so my left and right edges of my door have to go and line up with my vanishing point. So I'm going to put my ruler at my vanishing point here. I'm going to figure out where I want the edges of my door. So I hold it here. I know that I want it to this side, so I'm going to put the start of my door here and maybe the end of my door here. So I'm going to put it back on my vanishing point and line it up. Now I don't want my door to go all the way to the top, so I'm going to stop my line here. I'm going to go over to this other side, line it up with my vanishing point again, and this little line here at the bottom. Draw my line like that. Awesome. Then the top part of the door is going to have a line that is parallel to my top of my building. So as nicely as I can, draw my straight line like that. Now obviously not everything's going to be perfectly in perspective, and that's fine. The more details you add to your buildings, the less it's going to be noticeable if your lines are not completely, totally, perfectly straight. It will all work out. So one of the requirements is buildings and features on buildings have details. So whereas I could at another point, or maybe when we were a little bit younger, keep our door pretty simple and just add a handle like this and call it a day. However, we know from looking at doors and experiencing life that doors have frames, and windows have frames, and roofing has frames, and buildings have details for the materials that they're made out of. So we are going to be adding those kinds of details to our buildings to make them a little bit more interesting and unique. Remember that these are all buildings that need to have something in common with each other, some sort of theme. So these could also be buildings that are more from your imagination. However, we do want to draw inspiration from real architecture. So to add a frame around my door, all I'm going to do is try to create a similar shape inside. So again, I'm going to line it up with my vanishing point. I'm going to keep my door frame pretty thin. Right? So I'm basically going inside the shape that I just drew and drawing a smaller one so that this outside part is going to end up being the frame around my door. The inside part is the door itself. Now I can go in and add even more details like windows and handles. I can add steps going up to my door, but for now we'll keep it like this, and I will show you how to do windows. So the windows are exactly the same, except obviously they're smaller and a different shape, but we do the same thing where we line up with our vanishing point, figure out where you want the edge of your windows. So I think this is a good spot. And as the windows get further away, so the ones that are closer to the top of my building are going to look shorter and closer together. As we get closer to the bottom of the building, you're going to see a little bit more space in between the windows, and the windows themselves are going to be longer. Now, this is only because as things get further away from us, they look smaller. So in reality, all these windows are the same size, but because we are looking from the bottom of this building, it looks as though they are going they're getting smaller as they go up. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make my windows here at the top go all the way across, and this one's going to stop as it gets closer to my door. So we'll just line it up the same as with my door frame here. Draw the other edge of my windows, and then again we'll do a line straight across that matches the top of my building. add the window dividers. So I also, instead of using my ruler sometimes for simple lines, will just mark my pencil at my vanishing point and then lift it up and put it down when I get to where I want to add my line. And that will give me a generally nice line that I can go back with my ruler and double check. You can also add the dividing frames in windows as well, especially for like apartment buildings or houses and things like that, where you have these more detailed windows and less of just the big open pane windows. But you can also add in maybe some curtains, or a little cat. Right. We do want a good amount of detail in these. You don't need to draw things in the windows if you don't want to, but I do need to see at least some window frames. I also need to give myself a doorknob so that we can get in the building. And lastly, as far as detail on something like this, I do want to see a little bit of texture for the building. So every building is made out of something. Most apartment buildings and office buildings, especially in cities, are made out of bricks. So the easiest and most simple way to draw bricks without having to draw each individual one is to just give the illusion that they're there. So we're going to again follow these sort of horizontal lines. I'm just going to draw a couple sort of broken horizontal lines throughout. And then I'm going to go back in and add a couple vertical lines that intersect. And they don't have to be even, and they don't have to intersect in the same spots. And it's okay if they're a little bit messier of drawing. But this is just going to give a little bit of the illusion that your building has a texture of some sort and it's not just a flat, plain building. Okay, so now that we've got a simple building down, I'm going to show you how to draw a building with a peaked roof, right? So a roof that comes to a point. So something like a house or a church or any sort of older style building that you might see. We'll make ours a church since we already have ourselves a little residence here. So something that I like to do is to make all my buildings a different height. And to do that, I just start them at different points, and then when I'm done, I'll go back and erase all the lines up here where buildings don't touch. So I'm going to give myself a pretty high roof. So I'm going to pick a spot for my point to come to. And it doesn't really matter what angle you do this part of your point at. If you want it to be super, super tall and skinny, you can. If you want it to be a wider peak like this, you can. Just remember that everything gets smaller as it gets further away. So, because this is a fancy roof, I'm going to add another line here that gives it some thickness, except I'm going to make mine a scallop. And I'm actually going to go over this line a little bit into my next space. So, okay, it's going to overlap that building a little bit. Same on this side. Not a lot, just ever so slightly. I'm going to add another scallop. And I could easily make this a very simple roof, but little details like this are an easy way to add some character, as you would call it in actual architecture. So, got my roof. I, again, am just going to use the existing lines as the edges of my building. And I'm going to start with a door. And a lot of times on churches you see these sort of half football shape kind of doors. So it's kind of a triangle except comes to a rounded peak at the top. And again, it'll be helpful to look at pictures of actual buildings for this to give you a little bit more inspiration. But I'm going to say that this church is made out of wood. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on this building. Just a couple of lines. I don't need to draw every board. You just want to give the illusion that they're there. And then in just a few spots, I'm going to draw some lines going up and down. There we go. So we got a peaked roof and we have a flat roof. So we look at these, right? Keeping the buildings pretty simple, but you can also add your own details, right, to change them up, to make them a little more special. If you want to give, your building some stairs going into it, you can start here at the bottom with a larger rectangle and then stack, right, smaller rectangles on top of it as you get closer. I gave this building a sort of fish scale shaped roof. This one over here has a peaked roof that's kind of on the side view, so you can see the boards. You can add a lot of different details, or you can keep it relatively simple, but something that is a requirement is the details on buildings that definitely exist. So door frames, window frames, and building texture are a definite must. You have to include those. However, any other kinds of details, like adding things into the windows or decorating doors for holidays or anything like that, are optional. But I would love to see what you guys can come up with and how detailed you can get. You are absolutely allowed to use real buildings as a reference, and I would love to see pictures of those buildings and let me know what they mean to you. But as detailed as you want to get in this, I would love to see you get really, really in there, and I would love to see you show me a couple of your favorite places perhaps, or buildings that maybe you find extra interesting. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I will gladly put out another video if you want more in-depth specific drawings of buildings. Just let me know which ones you would want to see. All right, I can't wait to see what you guys do, and I will hear from you soon.